Hello, and you're welcome to yet another edition of Unfiltered Conversation on Cleveland TV. My name is Franca Miguel, and like always, I'd like to encourage you to keep signing up with us on www.cleveland.com. Believe me, it's a whole brand world of opportunities in cleveland.com. All right. Today, I have Honorable Dr. Shem Ochodo. All right, he is the President, African Diaspora Alliance, and Global Chairperson, the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. And they will be discussing next level for Global African Diaspora Symposium 2023. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you greatly, Franca. Thanks for hosting me, Glenat.
Yeah, good to have you on board. All right, we would like you to say more than what the introduction I just gave to you. Please tell us one or two things about yourself.
Okay, thanks. Shem is my name. As you've indicated, I'm very passionate about matters diaspora. I've been involved in this space for 30 plus years. I'm one of the older generations. And I believe firmly that Africa's transformation will come from two things, diaspora and technovation. I've had the privilege to live and work in about 100 different countries of the world. And it's in that belief and that experience that I realized what the Jewish were doing for their countries, the Irish diaspora, the Chinese, the Koreans, the Germans, and so on. And we thought that it's time that African and Kenyan diaspora in particular also get engaged in this space. In another life, I was a member of parliament. We moved the first motion ever to be discussed in Kenya parliament to enfranchise diasporas. But I must mention that I'm also an outgoing member of Africa Union, AU ECOSOC, General Assembly, representing the East Africa region, which is 14 countries from Madagascar to Ethiopia. And even in that regard, part of our goal is how do we enfranchise diaspora. So I am happy to be here. I believe diaspora is Africa's unmined gold mine.
All right, that's a great thought. Now, you are the president of the African Diaspora Alliance. We'll start with that. What are the main objectives, the focus, and the aims of the African Diaspora Alliance?
Thank you. I am glad last week you did interview my co-president, Dr. Malcolm Beach of North Carolina, stroke DC in the US. We have three co-presidents. Presently, I'm what we call the duty president, but soon Dr. Malcolm. And the main goal of AFDA, that's Africa Diaspora Alliance, which brings together African diasporas of different shades, particularly the two distinct groups. We have what we call the contemporary diasporas. That is, the diasporas who went outside their jurisdiction in recent times, or first and second generation. Maybe their parents or grandparents migrated to Germany or migrated to Fiji and so on and so forth. But in recent times, we call them contemporary. Then there are the historical diasporas, those who were involuntarily taken away from us 600 years ago to the Gulf, 400 years ago across Atlantic to North America and the Caribbean, as well as those who have lived in places like India for 10,000 years. Okay, you find Africans there. So there are those historical diasporas. Part of our goal is to find them wherever they are, because as President Kwame Nkrumah said, as long as you're Black, regardless of where you're born, you're African. So a major goal of FDA is to find them out, but bring them and have them mainstreamed and enfranchised in Africa's development and transformation, in line with Agenda 2063 of the African Union, and in line with other statutes, national, global. In this case, the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. I know they provide also for making it easier for diasporas to migrate and also repatriate remittances. So it's along those goals. In the case of Kenya, we're also working in line with the Vision 2030, which seeks to make Kenya a mid-income economy by the year 2030, and we're getting close to that. Diasporas remit already into Africa $100 billion every year. And of that, of course, most of it goes into Egypt, 30 billion, 25B to Nigeria, 9B to Morocco, between 4 to 5B into 3 countries each, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Ghana. So for Kenya, the diaspora remittances is more than all that we get from the 3 leading agricultural exports. So one would clearly say diaspora for Africa is the new sheriff in town, because they basically sustain Africa's economy. So AFTA is keen or to find structured manner in which to reunite them or bring those who are like-minded. Of course, we cannot claim it's not even feasible to get all diasporas, the millions, tens of millions of them together, but at least begin with those who are like-minded, who are keen to trade with Africa and to invest in Africa, and maybe visit Africa as business tourists.
So is that the reason for holding events such as the Festac Africa and the likes of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of the Festac, maybe before I talk of the GADS, the Global Africa Diaspora Symposium, we're very delighted. Next week, we will be in Arusha, Tanzania. Arusha is the capital of East Africa, for those who may not be aware. Some of us, the older generations, we were very delighted in 77 when Baba facilitated the hosting of Festac 1977 in Nigeria. While in Nigeria last week, with a light touch, I should say that the Global Africa Diaspora Symposium was done at another level, in a manner that only Nigerians perhaps could do it.
Yeah, we are going to discuss that extensively.
Coming to Festac. So it's in the same manner. The Festac 77 brought more than 12,000 Africans from all over the world to Nigeria. The follow-up Festac was last year in Tanzania, in Zanzibar, and this, I believe, is the third one taking place in Arusha. We'd want to encourage Africans of all shades, those who are able to attend physically in person, please be there. There's lots. The focus is trade and business, but also there is sport, culture, and tourism at play as well. Those who can't attend physically, please plan to be there virtually.
All right, let's talk about the Global and African Alliance now. But I remember asking Dr. Malcolm that same question. How sure are you that it's going to produce an advantage to the African continent?
Okay, one can never be 100% sure. I happen to come from the telecom world. No matter how much we try to secure systems through information or cybersecurity, you can only get to 99.99 something. But that's notwithstanding, we had the first Global Africa Diaspora Symposium in Nairobi, December 2020, with very interesting outcomes. One of the resolutions was to make it a biennial event. We were meant to be in Abuja in 2022, but of course, factors beyond control made us be there this year, 2023. And we're looking forward to being somewhere else. We're discussing with a country in the Caribbean in 2025. That was one of the resolutions. But in addition to it, there are a number of activities. There are 7 core areas that have been identified. I don't want to repeat them, but just to mention a few of them. The creatives industry is a major one. Health coverage is another. Green energy, and so on are areas in which we are keen not only to trade in line with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, but also to get investments into Africa. We are keen very often, maybe for the Kenyan case, currently diasporas remit $500 billion Kenya shillings into Kenya. That's the $4.2 billion in Kenya shillings. The government of Kenya, in collaboration with the diasporas, we've been tasked to double that amount by 2030 to 1 trillion Kenya shillings. But even as we hug about that, a number of our leading African American diaspora, like Dr. Malcolm and others, are saying, why talk of just Kenya shillings? We could be dealing $1 trillion. That's really our ultimate goal, but we must start somewhere. This is why if we are able to grow the remittances, the $100 billion into Africa, say to 200 billion within the next 5 years, would feel that we have achieved our goals. But obviously, we must put together building blocks. We were given 1 year, the 4 organizers of the Global Africa Diaspora Symposium, to come up with a cooperation framework, because we must find something that's structured, that has good governance in place. A major goal as Kenya Diaspora Alliance we've set in the next 2 years is to restore diaspora trust and confidence. There's a big trust deficit. So obviously, AFDA with our partners will also be doing all that is possible to restore that confidence so that we can see more remittances and we can also get more markets for our products. Not to mention that we also want to do value addition. As Kenya Diaspora Alliance, there are already 3 mini factories in the country that are operated and run and funded by the diaspora. And we're keen to see this happen in all the 47 Kenyan counties. And we hope other African countries are doing the same or will do the same.
All right, let's explore the Global Africa Diaspora Symposium held in Abuja, Nigeria, a few weeks back. All right, what are the take-home from that event?
There were a number of major take-homes. One, we were delighted to prove that partnership, the 17 goal of the SDGs, global partnerships can work. Because in this case, we were getting 3 major organizations which haven't worked together before, I must admit. The Organization of African Caribbean Pacific States, OACPS, in Brussels, based in Brussels, NIDCOM, the DTCA, that's the Directorate of Technical Cooperation for Africa, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Federal Government of Nigeria. The 4 organizations came together and proved what many naysayers believed wouldn't happen, to bring the eminent personalities all to Abuja to deliberate over 2 days on very important issues. We are keen, of course, they say the taste of the food is in, the taste of the pudding is in the taste of the food, if I may. And also they say the devil is in the detail. We are hoping that when we meet again in 2025, or even before that, midterm, we did agree in principle to meet in Kampala, Uganda. The top leadership from the Uganda government that were in Abuja did extend an invitation from Uganda's leadership that come next year to Kampala. So as the executive board of the Africa Diaspora Alliance, we're exploring meeting midterm to review progress, particularly finding this framework, cooperation framework, that's preferably formal to bring the different participants together. I well know that it's not very easy for government to work with non-governmental institutions, having been in the public sector as well as private sector and non-profit sector. But our goal is that all this must work together and work with the diasporas. So we'll be making baby steps towards getting diaspora to fully engage and work with the governments. So another major takeaway was OACPS, in collaboration with the government of Nigeria, did commit to establish the Diaspora Center in Abuja. We're very excited about that. Going forward, we're hoping that most regions, or all the regions, the 6 regions, I'm saying 6 regions of Africa because the diaspora is the 6th, can have their diaspora centers. The strong presence of ECOWAS, led by no lesser than the Secretary General, was commendable. The presence of the Africa Development Bank, led by Senior Vice President representing the President, was equally commendable. I also know the Afri-Exim Bank, Africa Export-Import Bank in Cairo, was just on the verge of getting on, but due to factors beyond control, they couldn't make it. But we had their blessings. Going forward, these are organs we are keen to work alongside with, not to mention the International Organization of Migration and the African Diaspora Policy Center in Europe and others. Our goal, and I must mention and I compliment Mama Diaspora, the chair and CEO of NIDCOM, and the leadership government of the federal government of Nigeria. I must also compliment the Nigerians through the leadership of organizations like NIDO Europe that came full blast to support this event. We look forward to holding hands together with our brothers and sisters wherever they are to move this journey ahead.
Because of our discussions, I know you've mentioned one or two things regarding my next question. All right, we talk about Symposium. You just had one in Abuja, and obviously in the next couple of years, you're going to choose another location for this same event. All right, so how do you use this symposium to build a stronger connection between Africa and the global diaspora?
Great.
How do you intend to do that?
Obviously, each of the symposia has got different themes. The theme for the one that we just had in Abuja was deepening relations and connections between the diasporas and Africans. The first symposium we had, the theme was mainstreaming diaspora in AU's Agenda 2063. So obviously, we're waiting for the organizers to agree on the theme for the 2025 Global Africa Diaspora Symposium. But the rallying factor is in all this is how do we strengthen the bonds between ourselves? A senior member of government from the Caribbean who was present in Abuja said he was coming to Africa for the first time. Obviously, as a senior member of government, one would have expected this may have happened much earlier. But that shows that we need to do a lot more work to engage and dialogue with our colleagues and make them both aware. I do know that there are challenges, of course, between the contemporary and the historical. Just like maybe taking the Kenyan case, there is also a gap between Kenyans abroad and Kenyans at home. But our premise is how do we need all of them in terms of inclusion. The SDGs talk of leaving nobody behind. Whether east, west, or north, they always say home is best. And home for all these Africans is Africa. But having said that, we hope that apart from building new relations, that some business deals get signed, and in between, other activities take place. For example, we plan a number of trips, roadshows to the US this year to engage with the Black business community, Black chambers of commerce, who, for example, in August have an annual conference in Georgia, Atlanta. But that's just one, and there are many others. For the case of Kenya, every December, and this year it's going to be 6th, 8th December, we have an annual homecoming convention to bring the diasporas together, but also to review what may have been achieved in the past 1 year. I cannot forget to talk about Africa's natural resources. In the past, some of us shied away from involving in the mining sector. It happens that the president of Kenya Australia Chamber of Commerce, who has been in mining in Australia for 20 plus years, is now chairing the Mineral Rights Board. One of the key areas he has been talking about, even as diaspora invest in real estate and properties and stocks, can they also think of investing in the mining sector? Maybe that's a story we can talk about another day, because to build the required infrastructure, we have wealth underground, whether it's oil and gas, ONG, there is lots of it and the African diaspora have talent and knowledge and skill and can access resources to tap and utilize responsibly those resources to develop Africa.
Like I said, I think we'll leave that for another day, because we'd like to have you back on this program to discuss on tourism, culture, and the dimension of Africa's development. But like you said, we'll still leave that for another day as well. But still on GADS, to what extent is the diaspora currently participating in the GADS future plans?
Sorry, in regards to?
In regards to GADS, the Global Africa Diaspora Symposium.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So what extent is the diaspora currently participating in the GADS future project?
I should say that GADS is just about 2 years old, so it's really a work in progress. The Africa Diaspora Alliance itself is only 3 years, was registered first 3 years ago in North Carolina in the US. That's AFDA US chapter. And the FDA Global was registered in Kenya just a year ago. So it's still a work in progress, but we are extremely keen to work with other diasporas. I must mention, Franca, that when we were organizing GADS Abuja, we reached out to all major African diaspora formations that we are aware of, because we think it's important that those are willing or are like-minded, that we find a way to work together. But I must also admit, a lot of work still remains to do. And if I use Kenya as an example, the Kenya Diaspora Alliance brings together 56 registered diaspora associations with more than 300,000 Kenyans across the world. There are 3 million Kenyan diaspora. That's still only 10%. So even though we are the main player in that sector, we still have to get another 90% Kenyans. The same with FDA. We still have a lot more work to do to reach out diasporas. And this is where we count on partners like Cleveland and others.
They're always on board and always ready to contribute. All right. Now,
and then allow me also to say Murakoze Chane in Kenya, Rwanda, or other African languages which I enjoy speaking.
Wow, that's a great answer. And now let's discuss the activities, all right? What activities should have been achieved before the next symposium? You just have one now. And then wisdom depicts that at least from now to the end, to the other symposium, there should be activities that will be achieved. What are you looking at?
Well, that's right. I should mention that our 4 major organizations that co-hosted GADS, each of them have got their own strategic plan and activities planned for the next 1 year or the next 5 years. As FDA, we are only now working on our 5-year strategic plan, but already there are a few things that we have targeted. And of course, we also rely on our affiliate organizations. So for now, the only one major target we have, of course, is the cooperation framework, but we want to see much more. I've also given the other target in the next 5 years. We want to double remittances into Africa to $200 billion a year in the next 5 years. We are yet now working to details. What do we need to do as diasporas, as countries, as governments, and as development partners to achieve that goal? So part of that is working, but I believe that as FDA completes its strategic plan, we may borrow issues. For example, I apologize if I use Kenya too much, but that's my country. I'm a bit more versed with it. The way we have targeted that we must have a factory per county. We have 47 counties. I think that's an encouragement we'd want to make to all diasporas. Initially, it could be having one factory for value addition or mini factory by diasporas in each of the 54 African countries. So that's a target. It can't be achieved overnight, but maybe in the next 5 years, if we organize well, it can be done, and much more. So that's, in Kiswahili, we call that kionjo. That's just like a little taste, a teaser, but much more could be done. And we're hoping when the cooperation framework is done within a year's time, there will be more clarity.
You know, it's one thing to have visions and then another thing to implement those visions. Now,
actually, before you leave that, Frank, if you permit, I do know there are lots of diaspora formations and organizations. Kenya alone, we have more than 1,000 diaspora associations in the US. Normally, my mark is I ask, even as you tell me what you will do, can you tell us what you've done? For the Kenya Diaspora Alliance, we can tell you what we've done. We have secured for Kenyan diaspora dual citizenship rights. We had to go to Supreme Court to get diasporas to be allowed to vote. And we've elevated the space of diaspora to the extent that now the Kenya government has a ministry specifically for diasporas. So there are few major achievements already got. But again, I must say they are only modest. We could do much more. So I'm hoping that even FDA, we are very keen to say, pinpoint what we have achieved. For now, maybe even having consistently the Global Africa Diaspora Symposium is a major achievement, so to speak, in Nairobi and then recently in Abuja. And we look forward, who knows, we could be in Jamaica or in Barbados in the coming years, 2025, God willing, inshallah, as the Arabs would say.
All right, so are we looking at any obstacles, okay, hindering this plans and vision?
Yeah, obviously, in any endeavor or pursuit like this, there must be obstacles. The major one is the information asymmetry. Most diasporas don't have information they need, whether it's to invest or job opportunities or trade or business opportunities in Africa. Equally, opportunities that are available to Africa in the global diaspora or in the world, so to speak, because diasporas are everywhere. Secondly, are policies. A number of African countries now have diaspora policies, but not all of them. Would want to encourage those which still don't have to have them. A number of African countries, governments now also have ministries dedicated to diaspora affairs. And I'm happy that Kenya has now joined that league. Many Francophone African countries have renamed foreign affairs to be foreign and diaspora affairs, or foreign and Malians abroad, or foreign and Senegalese abroad. I think that's really the way to go. And the contribution of diaspora is more significant in some countries than others. In a place like Cape Verde or Lesotho, diaspora contribute more than 20% of the GDP. So it's quite an important partner in Africa's development. Lastly, just to mention, even at the African Union level, there is an organ called ECOSOC, ECOSOC, Economic, Social, Cultural Council for Africa, which is meant to also enfranchise diasporas. There are 20 vacant seats which have been sitting idle for nearly 15 years. They are meant to be occupied by diasporas. The Pan-African Parliament, there is space, I think 2 slots or so. They are meant to be representatives of diasporas. But we have not come up with mechanisms to involve diaspora in those institutions, which is key. Not to mention that one of our partners, the 6th region, or ECO6 in short, are exploring an African, what could be like, already working on that. We are discussing with the T's and dots just to make sure that we meet all the compliance requirements and treaties so that African commercial banks can trade directly between themselves as well as with the counterparts in the diasporas. So there are things that are already happening, but of course one of the challenges, we don't seem to be moving fast enough to realize that dream. It's our goal and hope that both at the AU level, at the CARICOM level, CARICOM being the AU of the Caribbean world, the AU equivalent of the Caribbean world, that they move together, and our regional economic blocks, whether it's ECOWAS, SADC, Maghreb region, or the EAC, that they come up, and the national governments come up, and our parliaments come up with mechanisms that are diaspora friendly to allow diaspora to be enfranchised. Maybe in addition, I could also add that with a light touch, the creatives industry, and in this case, I have to compliment also Nigeria. We all know about Nollywood, now rivaling Bollywood and Hollywood. The creatives industry is a major area for creating decent jobs and businesses and opportunities for our young people, our women, so that nobody is left behind. But in addition to that, I may also just mention that in terms of skills and talent, Africa has got significant amounts of it. It's said that there are more Nigerian doctors in Texas state of the US than the whole of Nigeria, that there are more Ghanaian doctors in Manhattan City, New York, than the whole of Ghana. I'm not sure if it's true, but I have no reason to doubt. I know for a fact that according to the official US Statistics Bureau, that the average Kenyan born, strictly speaking, the average Kenyan in the US is more educated than the average American. I'm mentioning this not to give bragging rights, but to indicate that apart from the money and the funds diasporas can remit, there is a whole lot of skill, talent, and knowledge that we can also tap from the diasporas.
All right, Dr. Shem, you are still with Dr. Shem, and we'll still discussing the next level for the Global African Diaspora and Symposium. All right, Doctor, I have this question for you. I'd like you to shed light on the German projects.
Yes, Franca. As Kenya Diaspora Alliance, we're delighted, of course, in collaboration with the FDA, Africa Diaspora Alliance, to collaborate, work with the German government to support the project WeDo.Africa. WeDo.Africa, and actually that's also the website, is a project started by the German government and funded by them to support, through business grants, small enterprises in Africa, small to medium enterprises, but mainly micro to small, so to speak. In Swahili, we call them mama mboga. And in this particular regard, the project started with 6 African countries, if I can remember, Togo, Ghana, Ethiopia, Cameroon, Morocco, and Kenya. And initially for phase 1, which is just ending, and phase 2 expected to start later in the year, there were 8 diasporas in 8 countries participating. That's in the EU. That's Austria, if I can remember them, also Germany, France, Netherlands, Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, and 2 new countries are being added, Denmark and Belgium and Luxembourg for phase 2. So diasporas in those countries can participate to support a project, a small to medium enterprise project in those 6 African countries for phase 1. For phase 2, I would want to believe the idea is to expand to cover other African countries. But the pilot has been extremely interesting in that for the first time, it's not just like aid, donor aid as usual. This is also not a loan being given to Mama Mboga or the small to micro enterprises, but it's a business grant. But it goes through a very rigorous vetting selection process and an extremely useful coaching. So business coaching. The smallest amount is 250 euros, about $250. The highest amount for this particular project is 5,000 euros. So it may sound small, but for the micro to small enterprises, a lot of money if well used. One example that I can talk about, that I normally talk about, is a lady who had a daughter in Germany, and a year ago was assisted by the project to buy 4 pigs. Her family and herself, because it's shared 112. So if the entrepreneur puts 100 euros, the relative in EU sends also 100 euros, and it's all reflected via technology through a portal. And then GIZ gives double that amount. That's 200 euros. So in this particular case, the lady started with 6 pigs. You wouldn't believe, as of last week, she had 400 pigs in her farm and now going into other areas of business growth. So yes, WeDo.Africa is one of the programs, and we have plans for road shows, maybe not just for WeDo, road shows to Europe, to North America, to Australia in the course of the year, to sensitize and engage with diasporas and also get their feedback. Oftentimes Africa governments come up with policies they think are good for diasporas without involving them. We want to be sure that participate in ideas and give feedback in programs being evolved. So yes, we look forward to being in EU, and we will be working closely with Cleveland and others to push this agenda forward. As I make my final remarks, allow me to compliment Cleveland and my fabulous interview and hostess, Franca, for this rare opportunity, and we look forward to engaging much more. My parting shot is that diaspora is really, together with backed with technovation, that's technology and innovation, is, in my view, and in our view as Africa Diaspora Alliance, the answer to lift Africa out of poverty, out of hopelessness, out of joblessness, and to restore the dignity of every African wherever they are. This is why we are keen to reach out to our brothers and sisters in the different parts, whether it's in the Pacific, Oceania, in the Americas, in Europe, in Africa, because we also have diasporas. A South African working in Botswana is, by our definition, a diasporan. But above all else, we are alive to the fact that Africa is part of the global union of nations. So obviously, we don't exist in isolation, and we are keen to work with the UN, and we're already working with the UN organs. So lastly, to invite colleagues to Arusha, Tanzania next week, and also to Nairobi, Kenya in June, in collaboration with the UN IFAD. We are having the Global Remittances Fund for Remittances Summit being held maybe in Africa for the first time, but I'm happy to talk more about this in our next interview. Thank you so much for hosting us. Be blessed. Rakoze cyane. Au revoir. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.